Welcome to the Reality Revolution. Today, I have a special guest, the one, the only, Nick Zay, who has the amazing podcast, Universe the Game. You can find him on YouTube. He's an incredible consciousness explorer, an incredible writer. The 10 Secrets of Awakening is a great book I keep on returning to. And it's just so much fun to talk to Nick because we have the same interests, and he totally arouses my imagination every time I watch any of his TikTok videos or listen to his podcasts. And so it's just wonderful to have a chance to talk to the one and only Nick Zay. Welcome. How's it going, brother?
What an intro. Oh, that might be the best intro I've ever got, man. I'm
come
doing good.
on.
Excited to get into it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our last conversation, but I think we missed out on a lot. A lot of my audience didn't get a chance to really get to know you as I followed you. And I know that this is kind of a corny question, but I'd really like to know more about your origin story, a little bit of your story. You've kind of talked about it. You've been all over the country. You've had some past relationships, these crazy events that have happened that have sort of molded who you are and explain why you have this deep interest in consciousness. And so please share with me your story. And I want to know a little bit more about where you're coming from to this place that you're at now.
Yeah, so the origin story.
The origin story.
For me, how do I say this without not being too long? Because I could go for a while. We could
Don't
go
be
for
afraid.
a
I
little
want to
bit.
hear because it's really interesting.
Okay, so I mean, the general premise is that I've always been intrigued as to how the universe runs. How does it actually run? What are the principles? What are the laws? Are there any, or is it all just BS in this wild world of information we live in? Because there's so much information on everything. And so for me, way back in the day, I started to figure out that reality wasn't what it seemed. You know, I started off waiting tables at Red Lobster back in the day. You know, I did that to kind of pay the bills while I went to college for kinesiology. I was always interested in the study of human movement, how the body moved. Then I got into physical therapy, and I was like, okay, I'm doing an internship. These people just seem to be chronically coming back. Like nothing is getting fixed. It's like you give them, basically it was a pill in form of like, this is how you fix your diet, do these exercises, you'll be good. And then people would just come back re-injured because they didn't understand that the way that they were perceiving reality caused them to move in a specific way, which caused them problems, which is basically the problem that humanity has in general, that their perception causes suffering. The suffering causes deterioration of the mind, body, spirit, all of it. And so I just basically started to realize that people were running on false assumptions, basically the premise being that whoever's in charge has the person's best interest at heart. And that being the fundamental thing that I realized, that not everyone has your best interest at heart. Not everyone, like innocently, I think humans just believe this because we're raised and we're like, oh, we can trust these people. But we start to see that there's other interests that people have. And then I started to have kind of weird experiences where I remember taking a girlfriend at the time, like into the movie theater. This is like when the Incredibles 2, and the movie random, I know, but I was walking into the theater and I just felt like everything became 45,000 HD, 4K times 20. It was just locked in. And I'm like, and I felt this pulsing sensation here. And that was the first time that I had an experience that I couldn't explain. And so with that, it started to open me up to, okay, I'm actually experiencing things that you can't explain. What is this about? So then I started to get into, you know, the dark side and the light side, because I feel like the study of both and the study of everything really leads to a greater understanding, because there's truth in all things, but there's also distortion in all things. So we need to be able to recognize that. So that became my kind of journey to understand, not by subscribing only to one thing, like only one religion or only one philosophy, but really doing what a lot of people don't want to do, which is explore the things that many might think are esoteric. And then I came across Dr. Joe Dispenza, Uncle Joe, as I call him, and his science of the pineal gland and basically subconscious thing. I got into things like the Neville Goddard and the law of one was a huge thing we talked about last time I was here. And I started to see that, okay, there is a structure that potentially could exist. But then I started to see that there was little discrepancies between how, okay, you got the seven lokas above and below in Hinduism. Then you've got the seven densities in the law of one. Then you've got potentially Hermeticism with the seven principles on the nature of reality. And then you've got, the five different planes in Sufism. And there's just like a bunch of different ways to describe it. And then I just became fascinated with exploring which one of these could be the truth. And I don't know if we'll ever know. That's why I put out a video today saying, well, I don't know if we'll ever know understand the truth, but maybe the truth is beyond words. And so then I got into non-dual traditions, really deep states of meditation that are beyond symbols of reality. And there's a lot of, in this time period, there's a lot of Taoism combined with study of Hinduism, combined with even Stoicism, basically all the isms.
Right.
And I just wanted to study everything. And that's what I do now is I study what I feel like is interesting to me. And I just make skits now. Skits are kind of my main thing now. So
Best skits on YouTube, best skits everywhere. So, but behind the scenes, behind all that, and this incredible curiosity that you were going through some personal stuff in your life that kind of pushed you or molded who you were, that I found fascinating. You've had to deal with extreme poverty and family issues, and to see you as a light that's moving on and understanding consciousness while all this crappy stuff is happening is sort of inspiring. And it doesn't matter where you're at, you can still be seeking these things out and focusing on it. Has that molded you and pushed you along? Or tell me about how your relationship, what's been happening in your life and these things that have happened to your deep curiosity about the world and the universe.
I feel blessed that I wasn't given things just to be given them like a lot of people are in these trust funds and things, because it taught me resolve, it taught me resilience, and it taught me the full hero's journey that I think you don't get unless you have difficult things arise in your life. So I actually feel very grateful for them. And what you're talking about is, for example, when I wrote my first book, 10 Secrets of Awakening, I remember right when I started that and I did this challenge called the X of the Matrix Challenge, I had like $100 in my bank account. I'm like, I called up a friend of mine and said, what do I do? Do I go back to serving tables? How do I get this together? Because financially, I just wanted to make things. I didn't really want to sell things. And I realized it's like, I realized eventually that I guess I gotta make something that people can purchase. And so she told me, look, you got a choice. You have multiple timelines you can choose here. You can choose to go back to basically take the blue pill in a sense and just go back to the life before, or you can go all in. And essentially I went all in and I did the challenge. It did incredibly well. And then I did 10 Secrets of Awakening. And the entire time I was writing that book, I was living with my dad in a small apartment where I was detailing cars all day. So I would listen to podcasts and audiobooks about the nature of reality. Then I would come home and I would write all night. So I'd work all day, write all night. And then that came out and it was like an instant success. And then there's just continual tests along the way to see if I was going to let go in order to step in, because I can only step in as much as I'm willing to let go of that, which is holding me back. And for me, that was a lot of body image stuff, because I was 315 pounds. So there was also that lingering self-worth issue that I had going on. And so, I don't know if I lost you.
No, I got you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I still got you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I had that lingering, basically, do I look good enough for this? Which I feel like so many people deal with in today's day and age. And so that, from my childhood, losing all that weight and basically trying to figure out a way to cope in the world, because everybody copes with something, even if it's exercise, even if it's meditation, it's still a coping mechanism. And so for me, it was basically transitioning into things that were actually going to serve me. in serving the world. And so many people miss that part of taking care of themselves so that they have the energy to do what they love. And then also have to disconnect from all of the BS. Now, some people can handle more, some people can't, but there's a lot of fear out there. So it's also realizing the path of the artist of I need to hone in my craft. Sometimes I got to cut out the noise and just focus in. And so actually coming to terms that that's okay, that I don't need to comment on everything that's happening in the world, that I don't have to have an opinion. And sometimes that got draining for me too. So, there's
Yeah.
a lot of things.
My question that comes up with what you're saying is I oftentimes have this worry, concern when I look at my own life and the economic structure of the society that we're in, and the way we've got to make money to survive, and at least in America, it's an extreme capitalist situation. Like, I almost feel like it imprisons people within the third density. It Because of the amount of time that we spend just simply trying to survive and pay our bills. For the majority of people, they're not going to harvest. They're not going to get to that point and like, wow, I'd love to serve others. Like, the thought is not even crossing their mind. And so I worry in some cases that the world that we're in is structured in a way it's almost imprisoning us in the third density. And I'd like to get your view as you understand how the law of one works. Is it too much of an uphill climb? Is it an unfair situation? I want to go before the Council of Nine and say, look, the conditions that have been set forth in the game or simulation that you've set forth are absolutely unfair as a measuring principle to determine whether or not somebody should move to the fourth density. How do you feel? Do you think that it helps or aids us, or can it be a limiting structure that imprisons us?
Yeah, if we're talking about the law of one philosophy, then it's not even really about making money. It's only about really service to others and reaching more than 50%.
Right.
So if that's the case, then you could still, if it's 50%, I don't feel like.
Is it 50% from birth? Are they counting all your moments of your life? So, you start with 20, the first 20 years, you don't know crap about what's going on. You're not even in that place. So you're starting from behind right away. Then you got to go get your job. And you're going to be mostly focused on yourself because you need to survive in order to do this. And then maybe like 30 or 40, oh, wow, this is nice. I have a pretty good job. I'd really love to help others. Too late. You got to work another 40 years to even get to the 50%. Do you understand? My concern when I'm trying to, even though the system sounds great, but when they say in the law of one, only one or very few people have ever harvested, is the system designed so that we don't actually harvest?
The word harvest always freaked me out.
It freaks me out because it's a triggering, especially if you have any Christianity in your background.
Right.
It's definitely triggering. I think that Carla Ruckert used that word because of her Christian background too, kind of. So
sure, I see it more as like just complete the level, just complete the third density,
right,
and just move on to the next level. So
let's look at it as a game. Is the game impossible to move? Is the boss too hard to destroy? Is it too hard to move us to the next level of the game? Has the game? There's been some games out there that I've played that it's impossible. You get to that certain level and there's just no way I can get past it, and I eventually just I give up, right? Because the way it's set up, right?
Well, going back to what you were saying, if you're saying that you're focused on yourself and getting to the place where you have enough first, I almost feel like that's not necessarily the way that you have to go about it, because you can actually be is in service to others while you're doing those things. So if I was waiting tables, I could be like, hey, I'm serving these people right now. And then, better than anyone. I have so many people that have watched your videos that I talk to that are like, abundance is a frequency, right? So you about generating abundance. So it's interesting that you're, of all people, are saying this to me. But I don't know. It could be too hard. It could be too hard. I think I'd have to look at the numbers. I don't know what the numbers are, like, objectively. If I get out of this incarnation and I look and I see, okay, only like 200 people made it through, then maybe it's like a heroic raid boss that's too difficult. Or it could be like 20, 30 million. And maybe that's okay. It's really a hard question to answer. From my perspective, I can only look at my life and what I was able to do and come from a place where I didn't have a lot and learn how to thrive. And I believe that everyone else is another version of me. And then therefore they have the same amount of access to that potential within them to do things. And so I don't necessarily see it as a too hard of a game to play. It's just a game that's really going to make you choose the hero's journey. And if you don't choose the hero's journey, and if you keep refusing, there's not a lot of leeway of it gets easier or you have a lot of time to just chill. At the beginning, at least that's what I find.
Yeah, I mean, I go along with that. I have that question often. For me, I can intellectually understand it and start to go back and express it. And my hope is that in a single moment, that we can find that 51% that cancels out everything else, that in a single moment, we transform into this being that, you know what, I care a lot more about others than myself. I want to do what I can. I see myself in others. And that's my dream in the way that the simulation works is it's not a tally like a football game where you have scores that go up over time and then you're too far behind before you get to the end, that in a single moment you can have this transformation and it carries on like a pattern. I don't know. Let's talk. Brings me back to what you posted earlier. We have this law of confusion in third density. We're told that we can never know, that it's impossible for us to know. But one thing you and I have in common is, damn it, we want to know. we want to know. I don't care what they say. I know it's too complicated. I know that things are getting more complicated, but I'm still going to read everything that I can find. And I still want to know. I believe that I can learn and know in this dimension in which I'm told that I'll never know. Right?
It's a tough one. I mean, we want to try to figure it out, but there'll always be another layer which we probably don't realize or recognize. And all we can do is do things like the as above, so below, and try to figure out how this reality works. And if we can, then maybe we can get some sort of insight into how the higher realities work as well. It's a difficult one because it seems like the point is to try to figure it out to a certain extent, but there's still always going to be a level of mystery. So it's kind of paradoxically accepting that, look, I don't want to just be delusional and do nothing, but I also have to recognize that I'll probably not ever get the full thing. So where can I find a sense of harmony in the middle? You know?
I'd love to get your personal feeling around magic and the occult. Something I know that you're fascinated by is somebody that's interested in the universe. That's going to be a place that you're going to go. First of all, what are your feelings about magic, its history and its effects and its usefulness in this world?
Oh, that's a tough question. Where's this going? What platforms is this going to go to? Okay, let's just say to keep it nice and cozy, I think if you think about how throughout history humans have been scared of that which they don't understand, then there's always going to be, if someone taps into something that someone doesn't understand. I mean, what has happened throughout history? People get offed just because people think it's weird and it's heresy or it's demons. I think just to start off, the perspective that Christianity has that everything is demonic, that is paranormal, I think is a really narrow-minded perspective, just because it's basically cutting you off from the whole thing. And if you really think about it, what would the negativity, if they were to get a hold of the power structures, what would they want to do? Well, they would want to convince you that it doesn't exist, the light or the dark. Basically, the Christianity point of view is that if there are Jedi, they're demonic. And I'm like, well, there could probably be Jedi and Sith. So I think that just to kind of start off is one of the most important things that I realized is that we need to take a deeper look and not just write everything off. And I think there's a large history of both types of magic. I mean, I think the Law of One even talks about certain types of magic. I think in the Law of One, it talks about how certain people have negatively polarized using the tree of life, which is the Kabbalistic Jewish mysticism. So you can use it, basically insinuating that you can use it for positive and negative purposes. And that's kind of how I see magic. I see it as there's this extrasensory ability, kind of like in Star Wars where there's Jedi and Sith, and I see it kind of like there throughout history been people who have been able to master it. Some of those people have went on to do some very powerful things, and I don't think it's something we should write off, but I think it's something we need to be very careful with, because you can get tricked very easily by you with the law of one might call it negative entities. You can get tricked by manipulation because they invert everything. And if you look at our reality, virtue gets inverted all the time. And
Mhm.
people think they're virtuous, but they don't know the full story. So you have to be careful as to where you think your virtue is coming from, because if you don't explore the whole thing, you might find out that you're playing for essentially the other team. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to bring it back to non-duality, that both of these so-called teams are just different forces. I think there's, if we're talking about magic, there's basically two fundamental forces that run the universe, that being unity and separation. And these two are always at odds, kind of like the yin and the yang. And so if that is the truth, then that means that there's probably people embodying those forces if there's free will. So there always will be negativity to some respect as long as there's free will. And so we've just got to figure out as a society, what do we want? And, what are we willing to perceive as truth? And I think that a lot of the things, I mean, Nikola Tesla had a spirit radio box that he talked,
Right.
that he developed. So it's like a lot of times we hear that these scientists had access to paranormal things, but then the information gets lost. And I think that's on purpose sometimes. So I think we got to look deeper.
One of the most fascinating books I've ever read is the Confessions of Aleister Crowley. The hagiography, it's like this gigantic book, and he's telling his own story. He's insane, and he's clearly coming from the dark side. That was his intention. But I couldn't put the book down. I mean, he is curious like all of us, trying to read and learn everything he possibly could about the occult and the universe. And you can see as an example of how you can go the wrong way, but he had that same curiosity. You can see it all the time in history. People have that same curiosity that you and I have. We want to know what's going on, and we get sucked into one philosophy group or another because there are answers there, but I'm still fascinated by that. There's definitely a dark energy when you talk about somebody like Aleister Crowley, but at the same time, it's very mean, and like Mitch Horowitz termed it, like it's very mean. It's a mean sort of energy when you read what Aleister Crowley did, but still super fascinating, right?
I've never read it, but
Yeah, I mean,
I've heard the name before, and I've heard what he's about. But
yeah,
like I said, we just got to be careful, because sometimes you can start to lose your empathy for others, and you can start to lose your
exactly.
connection to others, and then you start to see, well, I could just get to the top pretty easy here if I just do these couple things, and then you
Right.
see people are doing that all the time,
I
and
mean, you look
so.
at Darth Vader. I mean, started off good, right? One
Mhm.
one little thing, a little battle at and, around a volcano. Next thing you know, just happens,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think these stories that we are hooked to, I think we're hooked and gripped for a reason, because we realize there's truth in them, you know, that there's truth in these stories and these movies that we see. And I think there's a lot that's hidden in movies and stuff like that.
Tell me
So,
something that you've read about recently, maybe about our ancient past, cool information about the occult that still is on the tip of your mind, that's fascinating you. Maybe something I haven't heard of. I love to hear stuff like that.
so I don't know. I started to get into recently. A lot of people have probably been in this before me, but I've just been so busy with other stuff. I got into Graham Hancock stuff recently in Ancient
Yeah.
Apocalypse. And for me, I think that he's really got some compelling evidence in there of ancient civilizations. And I think it's called the Slithurian
Silurian
hypothesis.
hypothesis. Yes.
Right. So that's one that also interests me, where you have such a long span of time that it would basically be impossible if civilizations existed long ago to have any trace of them through everything that's happened. And there's different parts of that hypothesis, but that's one part of that hypothesis that really intrigued me. And so of course it's going to be hard to detect these ancient civilizations, because Imagine if they do what we do and they had to do all digital stuff. There's no trace. I mean, if we get flooded
Right.
out right now, where are we going to have things for people to even, people are going to think we're
Right.
cavemen,
I
you
guess
know?
even the plastics would eventually dissolve away, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I find fascinating, is that most of the dinosaurs we don't know about. I mean, the very few fossils that we have,
There's
it's sort of a
35, I
rare and
think.
unique thing that we're even able to see traces of a dinosaur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Skyscrapers wouldn't be around, automobiles, cars, jets, all that stuff would just be completely dissolved. And people think, oh yeah, we'd see remnants of this. No, we wouldn't. We actually wouldn't, right?
And the interesting part is that I feel just intuitively, this isn't necessarily something I mean, I've studied these cultures, but I feel like right now I've been studying the ancient Egyptians a lot. And I feel like they just had a different type of technology. And some of the granite stuff that they can cut, I mean, it's so precise. So
Right,
there's different dynasties of Egypt, and so the earliest Egyptians that we have record of, they were using tools, and I would have to show you basically images of these, but
right.
the amount of precision that it takes to cut in the way that they did, it's damn near impossible unless they had some sort of power tools. And so I think that's one really good piece of evidence that
Hmm.
these civilizations were more advanced. And then I also feel like there were continents that just went under, and there's a lot of the reason why we can't see or find a lot of this stuff is because it was in the ocean and then it just
Right.
deteriorated.
We
And
just don't
so
have the ability to properly explore the ocean.
mhm.
Clearly, Egypt is carrying some technology from somewhere. It didn't just pop up out of the blue. They were using this technology, boom, out of nowhere, as if they had migrated to Egypt and had come from somewhere else, already having all these amazing technologies, right?
Yeah, I think in the Law of One it says that they came from Atlantis, right?
Right. Yeah. Definitely a
Mhm.
link from Atlantis to Egypt. Even if you ignore the Law of One, there's clearly a link to a former civilization. And I think that, you've talked about it on your podcast. It's pretty fascinating. You even dedicated an episode to the pyramids. And of course, they talk about it in the Law of One. But there's still all this really other interesting information that people have posted about what the pyramids were. What's your vibe on that, on the pyramids?
I mean, when I first started getting to Law of One, it was I think book 2 or book 3. I can't remember which one, but there's
Yeah.
basically is a lot of material dedicated to the pyramids and how they were healing devices.
Hmm.
And if I had to put a guess as to what the pyramids were, I would say they're either healing devices or they're some sort of power plant of some sort. I think it's interesting that Tesla studied them and we have a record of that. And I really wonder what he got from them. And that's been part of the thing I've been looking at recently as well. What did he know about the pyramids? And so I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but there's a specific type of electromagnetic field that you can only get from pyramids. And I think there was something to do in Russia where they built pyramids and then
Right.
they were smaller pyramids and then they
They're
could
kind of
actually
like
heal
more
people.
pointed and steep,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense if you look at the astrological alignments of certain time periods that they may be things that were made for healing. And I think there needs to be more experimentation with that. But unfortunately, when people experiment, sometimes weird things happen to them. So it's interesting. And I feel like a lot of the reason why we don't see a increase in human invention like we aren't in the Jetsons right now, for example. I think that that's because of interest in the current way things are running. And it kind of comes back to what you were saying at the beginning in maintaining profits and doing these things instead of beings looking at what is the greater good for humanity. What could we do if we really just let the public know about everything? I think there seems to be some sort of higher up structure that is basically saying you guys aren't ready for this.
Right. There's
And it's
clearly
like,
the
what?
ability to eliminate cancers, to travel the world without any major fuel usage. There's clearly technologies that have been available for a long period of time that are being limited. It's obvious. It's not just me being conspiratorial about it. There's
Mhm.
already technologies that have come about recently that we've had available for a long time that we simply ignored or for some reason was precluded. And so yeah, I absolutely believe like technology is being controlled because there's a fear of its effect on our consciousness, and clearly it feels like that negatively polarized group is doing what it can to limit our consciousness and our exploration and awakening.
I think all this, I, interestingly enough, feel as though all of this is happening for humanity's benefit at the end of the day, even though it's really hard to see, because humanity has to learn that lesson I was talking about, where not everyone has your best interest at heart, and that means in every aspect. And so humanity is unfortunately too complacent right now. It's too comfortable, and
Mm-hmm.
to us it might seem like this is difficult. Well, imagine if you're getting completely shit on every day. Eventually you got to be like, wait, why is it like this? And I think that if we look at the solar cycles, we're coming up on a solar maximum, and we know from Alexander Shesetsky's work on the solar maximum that humans get really hype, let's just say, around that time. So I think we can expect a lot of changes to come as more of humanity gets that energy from the sun, gets what he calls human mass excitability, and change starts to happen.
You mentioned it in your book that there is a discernible effect, and you document it, from solar activity on what's happening in our world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
So, clearly we're seeing. We'll be interested to see how that plays out, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fearful. I feel as though if we, our intention sets our reality, but we also have to follow through with action, because everybody wants things, right? And you know this because of all the things you do on manifestation. Everybody wants things, and there's a big difference between wanting something and then bringing it into reality using reality bending techniques. And I think that if we understand those laws of how reality works, we can be taken care of, and then we can, in a sense, show others what's possible. And so I think that's kind of what's happening. You're having people that are figuring it out and then inspiring the rest of the people to be like, hey, you can do this too. And thank God for the internet, because the
Yeah.
internet is the thing that is, I think, going to liberate humanity, even though it seems like it's kind of doing the opposite right now. But it's a double edged sword, because you can use the internet to find all of this brilliant information, or you can use it to distract yourself all day. And that's where the hero's journey really begins for a lot of people.
It's well said. So, Mike, just to go beyond that and talking about reality creation, as you mentioned in your book, clearly you're a fellow traveler in the
Mhm.
multidimensional worlds, and you've worked on these techniques and meditated and experimented not just with the law of attraction, which I talk about, but actually traveling into a parallel reality. And it's very subtle. It's different for everybody. I'd like to get your feeling of when you've done these practices and you've seen shifts, especially somebody like you that's traveling all over. I bet it's really fascinating when you discernibly know I've shifted into another vibrational timeline, another frequency, another place. It's discernible. I know that right now what I've done before has moved me into this other realm. And I'd like to get documentation for when people have experienced that. Now, how have you experienced that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of esotericness to this, and there's also a lot of new age kind of deception about this. And, I talk about some wild things, but I do think that there are some people that just make stuff up. Now,
Sure.
my experience with this is essentially that there is an infinite amount of timelines that we can choose for the future. And I think that if we stay on the same timeline and we do the same things over and over, what that essentially means is that we stay on that same timeline. And when I shift, if I'm, let's say, jumping timelines, for example, it's not that I'm shifting my universe. I'm not going into a different universe. I'm essentially just shifting the timeline and the frequency that I operate at, which immediately shifts what the future timeline is. And so if I'm going to a higher timeline, I'm actually just taking that potential reality in the future and every moment embodying that. So then there becomes a bridge to that higher timeline, because again, if we just do the same repetitive actions, which we know that humans are very prone to doing the same things over and over and over with the subconscious. So when I'm moving and shifting, I can feel a complete shift in my perception, which then I witness around me as everything changes and wild things start to happen. And it wasn't until you open yourself up to that. It's kind of funny, because I think if you really want to describe how this universe works very simply to like a 7-year-old, it would simply be this thing runs on placebos. Now, however you want to placebo yourself, you go about that. But if you can placebo yourself into, let's say, because here's the thing, if you think that you're not worthy, that's just your belief. It actually is only real because you perceive it to be. And if you shift that, that placebo then creates a different reality based on that belief system. And it's nothing other than how you're perceiving reality and your actions aligning with those being brought to you. And then you have the part that a lot of people miss, which is feeling the sense of wholeness that you would feel if you already have it. Now, some people do better. I think some people do better when they're just like, yeah, I've got this thing. I feel so good, even though they don't see it outside of them yet. And some people do better if they just focus on, I just feel whole and complete and I don't need anything. And I would prefer to experience this, but I feel so good right now that it doesn't matter. And I think both of them lead to abundance.
Right.
And so, yeah, for me, I see it as every decision that we make, we are creating reality with. And if we stay the same, then we're going to stay in the same timeline.
Now, have you reached a point where you saw real glitches in the reality, where you're seeing things like the Mandela effect that were not there before? For instance, the other day, I have an author that wrote one book. It was really good. And I know for sure, because I'm a damn good researcher, this guy didn't write any other book. There's no way this guy wrote a book, because I would have found it. I owned a bookstore at the time. I've searched on, I know all the places to find obscure books, and I'd done this search. And then the other day, just casually watching a video about this author, he's got all these other books in his bookshelf. And then I go on and they're all there. And that's the kind of thing I see all the time. I see my keys are moved to a different place in the house. I know for sure that I don't remember putting them there. I've had lamps that suddenly appear or disappear, places, geographic locations that are adjusted and changed. It seems like the underlying rules of the simulation make it just a minor adjustment, usually something that we're not really supposed to notice for us to continue on that timeline. And the more I'm open up and the more I shift, it's more I start to notice these things. I used to make a big deal about them. Oh, honey, you got to see this crazy thing. We have this new lamp. And then, now it's just like, yeah, I know I shift. Now it's just a personal confirmation to me. I don't need to advertise my insanity about it. But have you experienced these sort of glitches?
Yeah, I feel like reality only exists within our point of view. Not exists, but our reality is only rendered from our point of view.
Right.
And so I think that rendering, it can re-render and it can re-render different. And we could potentially be getting, patches is what I would think about it.
Yes.
Like
so a new patch has come through.
Humanity's like patch 3.0, patch 3.5, and things change a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, it's interesting because we can't even prove that we were in this body yesterday, because
no, we can't.
This could be my first time as Nick today, but I just have all the implanted memories of the past. So it's so hard to say for certain what's actually has happened and what do we just have a sense has happened. But I mean, my whole thing is that the universe is a game. So yes, I've experienced potential glitches. I've also experienced the geometrical shapes that run the universe in when I'm coming out of brainwave states. Like if I'm in alpha,
yes,
for example, and I'm coming up and I can I actually am looking at night and I can see the fractal kind of overlay that is on the screen. And it's so funny that people don't understand the video game concept. And the first thing I say to them is, all right, you go in your bedroom, turn all the lights off, and then look at what's happening right here. And it looks like it's static. it almost looks like static, like a video game or like a static TV that we used to have. If you just
Yes.
shut your eyes, if you literally just shut your eyes and look, like right now, even
Hmm.
it looks like they're static. And it's like that's a first hint that you could be in a simulation or a video game. I mean, I don't think that I don't know, but my perception is that the universe is intelligent enough that there need not be NPCs in this game because there is an infinite source that could create an infinite amount of souls that are on an infinite amount of their own journeys. So I would see no need unless we're in a reality that is limited in some sort of logistical hardware software way where there's only enough space for this or that. But if we're all rendering our own reality whenever we go somewhere, then that wouldn't even matter how much space, because let's say 2 miles away, where you're at is not rendered for me. The only thing that's rendered is what I'm seeing right here on your screen, and then what I can see and perceive within any sense. So that could be 2 miles if a sound goes off, but I don't think that it's fully rendered. And that's something that they're exploring. They in the Nobel Prize of 2020, what was it, 2022, with the universe not being locally real. I mean, that's also the same conclusion that science is coming to. So what I'm saying is really not that far fetched when you have science coming out and saying very similar things about, Einstein was proven wrong. Does a tree, when a tree falls in the forest, is it actually make a sound? Well, actually, no, it doesn't. What? So
Right.
wait, we're all coming to the same conclusion here. You might sound mystical or weird in the way I'm saying it, but that's part of what I do too, is I link the science to the spirituality, which is a lot of my videos recently, you know?
Right. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So the question then I'd love to ask you about, because you talk a little bit about human design.
Mhm.
What I have found the most effective way for me to shift into realities is to start to change, completely change my identity, so that I let go of all the little things that define me, all the categories that I get put into. No longer am I a Leo or a male or a certain political persuasion. People love to freaking categorize me. Almost feels like it's my soul's journey is to escape from any category. I go to an event recently, and I'm told that my personality matrix is within 4 quadrants. I'm either controlling or creative, and when I go to work, when I'm back in the day in the mortgage company, they had us take a personality program, and I'm either an orange or a red or a blue, and everybody is wanting to put me in a category all the time. I'm a projector. I'm not a projector. And anytime I find that I'm in being categorized by any group, no matter how accurate or real it is, that it feels like it's diminishing my ability to explore the unlimited possibilities of the multiverse. And so oftentimes I find, I'm both. I'm the blue and the red. I'm the creator and the controller. Anytime I get a category and I start looking at it, I start to see I'm all those categories, but I see that it's really big in the spiritual field to classify me, to categorize me, to put me in a group, to say that because I was born on this day, I'm this thing. What is your feeling about that aspect of these categorizations? Because sometimes they're very real. When I'm reading my horoscope and I'm talking about that, some of it's very real, but I don't want it to be. I don't want to be told that I am a projector. I want to be given the choice to be whatever I want, and I don't want to be stuck in that category. I'm a man. I can't change that. Well, I guess I can, but I mean, energetically, I don't want to let that limit what futures and or realities I can explore. Right?
My man wants no limits,
No limits. So, do you
all
think
freedom.
that's the only way for me to truly explore the multiverse? Because we are limited we think it's unlimited, but we're limited into a very little small select group, and we suddenly feel like we have freedom to choose between these 2 or 3 things, but they're all limited and defined by who I supposedly am supposed to be, the category that I've been placed within. And it gives the idea that, oh, I'm free to explore these 10 or 12 things because of where I'm born, where I live, the kind of beliefs I already have, and the category I've been placed within. Right? Am I making sense? Does that
What
make
a
sense?
question. How do I even begin on that?
Right.
Okay, so I mean, if we're talking about human design,
That's just one example.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
my
yeah.
sister is huge into human design. I get it. And she wants to tell me that I'm a projector, right? And I read all the different categories of human design, and I'm all of them. I see
Hmm.
myself in all of them. If we are at the law of one and we are all one, and I see myself in everyone, I am not that category. That just limits and separates me. It's a separation device. I don't know.
Okay, so interesting. Now, how I would say this is very simply from the human design perspective, your body is like your bodily energetics. You're seeing your projector.
Right.
This is just like your height. It's like you're telling me I
Can't
don't want to
control
be
that.
6'7" because
It's a
Brian
good
Scott is six
point.
foot seven. So it's like, what are we to do about it? Do we want to understand it
Right.
and use it, or do we want to deny it? And the nature of being human is limitation.
It's
So
true.
accepting some sort of limitation or not, if you decide not to, you're now a mystic seeking enlightenment, which is okay. You can do that. And so, I mean, I think the ultimate kind of path that humanity is taking is to unify, to then realize the unlimited nature that we all are. So I think what you're bringing in is like a higher perspective of I am above all of these, which is what a lot of ancient traditions tell us. So yes, you are correct in that. And the question is viscerally in your human experience, does it help you to have these experimentations with human design or with astrology? And if it's something that helps you, then go for it. But there are some people that it's not going to help. Some people it's going to feel
Yeah.
like this is annoying. Why do we have this? This doesn't fit me. And so I think it's a really a personal thing. I found human design to be helpful for me.
Hmm.
And I do feel like when I've experimented for the past couple of years with being a manifesting generator and being something that's called sacral authority, where I feel a uh, a sacral response to things, a yes or a no. And if I look at my actual human experience, this is actually something I do find to be true for me.
Did this
And
did this create that for you though? It's the chicken before the
is it
egg
a
argument.
placebo?
Yeah. Is it a
Mm-hmm.
placebo?
It definitely could be, but I'll tell you right now, that's why I'm not a guy who's like, this is the ultimate truth. That's why I
Right.
say experiment. If it works for you, then it works and use it. But if it doesn't, set down the tools. They're all tools, you
Because
know?
Neville Goddard was very, very much against it. I mean, he was really into astrology. He talks about how he did the astrology, and then one day it came along that his numbers were all wrong, or this girl that he was working with, her numbers were all wrong. She accidentally gave this guy the wrong astrological chart, and it turned out all exactly as she said. And he is explaining the pearl is the great price, that God is the source of all, and if you, as soon as you separate yourself into one of those classifications, you lose your power, is what he was trying to say, right? But
Mm,
I I,
that's
I
interesting.
get I get both. I get the because it's really helped me too. Sometimes these categories have revealed things about myself that I needed to know, that I don't want to be categorized, but it's true that it does help me. So there, it feels like there's this paradox between both, right?
Yeah, I
So
think there's I am, which is the truth. I am.
right.
And then beyond that, whatever you essentially decide is your character is the thing that will essentially continue. If you actually fully lean into it, that will tend to manifest in our reality. So whatever it is that you decide, it's within limitations, because like I said, humanity does experience a level of limitation. I'm not going to be a plane, but for example's sake, if I believe that I am worth this much, or I can do these things and I can bring these people into my life and everything's going to happen for me, some people might say it's delusional, but then when it happens, people are like, how'd you do that?
Right, right,
You
right.
know? So yeah, I get what you're saying. There is a interesting paradox of it. It could help some people. My ex, it very much did help. She very much, bought into human design. And that's how I have a lot of the knowledge I do, is because she saw the whole world through it. And I also see the counter argument that it can get something can get culty. I mean, when you start to say this is what I am for sure, and anything that's outside of this isn't me, it isn't my experience, I can't operate in this way because this is what my chart tells me I need to operate in. So of
Hmm.
course it can become a huge limitation. And I think that's when you're talking about what Neville's referring to. I think that's what it is. That everything, any sort of identity can become a trap. It just, are you using it or is it using you? You know?
Really well said.
Yeah.
So when you look at the history of our planet, history of our universe, and you start to consider reincarnation, as you talked about on another podcast, and you've had some interesting discussions about this. My first question to you is, do you have memories or remembrances of events that were outside of your timeline ever come up for you?
So I'm not a big past life regression guy. I've had probably like thousands of people have been like, "Go get your past life regression. We want to
Right,
know
yeah.
what it is and what you do." And I'm just like, you know what? It just hasn't come naturally into my field. I haven't really felt like it's my time. I mean, at some point I might, but no, I don't base my I don't know if I'd call it belief, but my intuition that reincarnation is real on a subjective personal experience. I base it on research, and I base it on
Right.
what I look at these ancient traditions and how there's a lot of missing information in a lot of the, I don't even know how to word this, specifically Christianity, yes, but when I started to research and I saw how reincarnation was a focus point of Eastern traditions for a lot longer than you could even call Christianity New Age to a certain respect, because it is the newest religion
Mm-hmm.
in comparison to some of these old mystics and masters of the East. And so I wanted to know what are the people that have been around the longest and have the most continual people saying, because just because something's around for a long time doesn't mean it's the most accurate. But I think it's important to see what have beings who have dedicated their lives, like the Vedic traditions is essentially what I'm referring to. What are they saying? Because they've been around for a very, very long time. And when I started to connect to that tradition and that philosophy, the Vedic philosophy, I mean, I've literally got, you know, right here, I can pull it out. We've got Autobiography of Yogi. You know, we've
Right.
got this one here, one of my favorites of all time, which is the Bhagavad Gita,
Oh yeah.
the Yogananda translation. So when I started to connect to these, there is just a feeling of, I don't know how to describe this other than you can feel truth sometimes.
It's
And
well
it's
said.
something that you cannot explain to someone who can't feel truth. And I think, you know, our boy Dr. Hawkins covered that in many of his books, kinesiology, muscle testing, and how your body can
Yeah.
actually feel truth. But with these books, I connected on a deep level to the concept of reincarnation that I could not explain. And then I started to get into simulation theory and how there may be a chance that we are in a video game. And then I started to see how, wait, these Vedic traditions are telling us that we are dreaming, that we are the dreamer and the dream at the same time, and that reality is an illusion in a sense. And so, wait, how does that connect to a video game? If if they had video games back in that time, would they have just said it's a video game? You know, and that really got me intrigued on this link. And I think that's where a majority of my philosophy comes in, is there's a link between reincarnation and kind of spawning into a video game and the video game philosophy that not a lot of people realize. And that's one of the things that really has fascinated me over the years and really got me interested in both the science and the spirituality. Because if you just take the spiritual route and you take everything that there is nowadays, it can be very, I don't want to say dangerous, but it can be very delusional,
Yes.
because anyone can make anything up and say that they're channeling anything. And there's no
Exactly.
guru, there's no master that is there to tell them, hey, you're kind of full of shit right now. I'm gonna need you to stop. Like that's what they had in the East. They had gurus who were living embodiments of the divine that would basically be able to tell. And you could feel, it's not even, that's the interesting part though. People might say, oh, they could be fakes and frauds. There were.
Of
Sure, I'm
course.
sure
Yeah.
there was. But with a lot of these world renowned that have lasted throughout history, you can feel something called the silent aura, which is essentially the feel that they emanate. And so this is one thing that I've thought about too, is like there have been masters throughout history that you can actually feel that they're embodying it, and people will go in their presence, have miraculous healings. I
Yes.
mean, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down, because you can talk about, well, I'm working on a video that's coming out soon about Jesus in India, because that's an interesting one as well. And I think that could change the
Don't get me
entire history.
started. We just getting close to the end of this. We could Yeah, I've read all that stuff. I'm fascinated by that stuff, Jesus in India for sure, no doubt. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was Victor Odo said something at a recent event about reincarnation, and he does QHHT where he's doing these reincarnational therapies. He said, I'm still not sold on it, but I know when I have these memories and experiences, the symbolism of them is healing. So it doesn't even matter if it really happened that I had this past life, but going through this memory of this past life brings out an awareness of me as I am now. Like when I had a recent reincarnation, was going through a QHHT, and I just remembered this dude in Britain who was total asshole to his family, thought he was all uppity and smart, but he just ignored his son and his he had this gigantically fat wife that he ignored, and that was me. And I was like, when I walked away from that memory, like feeling, okay, I ignored my family, and I got to deal with what I was doing, and how I was dealing with myself, and how I treated myself. I walked away with that kind of learning a little bit more about some part of myself, even though I have never lived that part of my life. At the same time, I've had a reincarnation of QHHT experience where I was born in an egg, and I was from another planet, and I'm still trying to understand all the nature of this. It had something to do with my emotions and my feelings. So I don't know. I'm like you. It feels right when I go inside and ask myself, is this true? If I muscle test myself, this information feels valid and right. And that to me is the most important thing, because we are still in the law of confusion. We will never know for sure. We're not supposed to know for sure, but gosh darn it, I wish I had a pretty good clue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a better explanation than reincarnation as to what's going on here. I mean, if you just take even if you just take a purely logical perspective, then if you said, okay, well, there's going to be the Christian perspective of there being a creator who's just going to come here and give you no memory, but hope that you find this book, and if you find the book, then you'll make it, and if you don't find it on accident or things happen, you're just going to burn. That's not really like an explanation that actually makes a lot of sense. And so I think if you just look at it from that perspective of, okay, you get multiple tries to figure it out in a world. I mean,
Right.
talk about a hard game to play. If the Christian game is the game that we're actually playing, that's
We get one
That's
shot.
way harder. That's
Right.
way harder than
Right. And you are tortured in hell forever, for trillions of years. If you blow it in that short little time frame that you're given, that's it.
Yes,
Oh.
exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence of reincarnation. There's, a University of Virginia studies, Dr. Ian Stevenson, where he did the
Mm-hmm.
studies on children who could remember past lives, and they can solve their own cases of being unalived and these crimes and these things. It's just wild what they have birthmarks, and they're able to explain it, and then they go find their bodies, and their bodies have the same, where like they got hit in that spot, and it's
Yeah,
just
the
things.
birthmark argument's crazy with that may have been your death wound or a major injury in your past life. It's just
Exactly.
yeah.
So there is a form of evidence that we can document with the children like that. So it's not just, oh, this sounds nice, because I also don't want to base my perception on, oh, this is nice and pretty and this is the easiest thing.
Right.
So that's got to be the explanation, which I think that's Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is probably the one that makes the most sense. But who knows, man? I mean, it's an interesting argument if you want to bring in like extraterrestrials as well, because that changes everything.
That's true.
When it comes into reincarnation and when it comes into this reality, are there extraterrestrials? I mean, we talked about the ancient past. Are extraterrestrials things that seeded humanity? Is panspermia a thing? Was there a meteor with a mushroom on it that came and bacteria survived space and then gave
Yeah.
us a sense of this is where we came from, and then so another planet maybe started evolution. Were we on Mars? Did Mars have a friggin'
Right.
atmosphere like we thought before? Is Bigfoot the replacement for humans if they off themselves? I don't know.
Now I'm fascinated by what Neville Goddard's perspective, because he didn't believe in reincarnation, but he believed in the wheel of recurrence, and he in hundreds of lectures. And I asked Mitch Horowitz if he had found this, and there is a historical history of this belief Gurdjieff was another one that believed it, is that we just relive our lives over and over again. Now, Neville Goddard expanded on that and said, you relive your life over and over again, or you live it in the past or in the future, that when you start your new life after you die, it's not linear, that you are taken to a timeline that's specific for you in opening up your godhood. He also would explain that he started to remember all of his different recurrences. So he remembered, and so he kind of knew what was going to happen in his life and when he was going to die. And he's talking about that in his lectures. And he says he would meet people in these other worlds. In that world that you go to, you're reborn at the age of 20. So you don't have to redo your whole childhood, which is a big waste of time. That you start when you're 20. In a new life, you have all the memories like we were just talking about. You don't know if you were in your body. You wake up in a new body. You believe that you've been in this, and you fear death. You get married, you get divorced. You have the same fears, and you keep on doing this cycle over and over again until you awaken. Which, in the simulation theory, might make even more sense. Why waste time with having to go through a childhood but once, right? So I don't know. I find that. But I'm interested because Nisha, I think he discussed the Wheel of Recurrence. We had a Groundhog's Day type of existence where we became awoken and aware of what was going to happen next. That plays similar to reincarnation, but a little bit different, right?
Now I got to look into that. I've never heard of that one. That's interesting.
Check out my episode on cycles of recurrence, and I talk about what he says, and I read. There was an author with Gurdjieff that went over this. If it would be incredibly sad if we were just reliving our life over and over again.
Is that what he's saying it is?
Nisha is saying it, and then Neville Goddard says he calls it recurrence, but he says there is the chance that you can move to another place in the timeline and you start going through a recurrence there or in the past. That the place that you move, the timelines are as Neville read in a recent lecture, the timeline's already laid out all the way to the end. It's already there. It's already existing and it's done. You just end up in a little window of time every time you recur. Generally, in most people's cases, they stay in the same timeline. But then sometimes he talked about people that he knew. Yeah, there's people that go into the year 3000. It's just so out of left field for somebody like Neville Goddard to say that. It's like, my question was, where did this come from? I found a little bit of it. And there was a belief in recurrence before, back in the ages, back in ancient Greece and the Library of Alexandria in that time. They were really big believers in an infinite recurrence that occurred. I don't know.
So it's kind of like reincarnation. It's kind of like respawning in.
It's exactly like reincarnation, but you're respawning instead of having to start from birth. Which would, you start at the new save point. There's a save point probably for that. And so the theory then would be that you're moving into the role of an actor in that life. Somebody else has already lived that life in 3000 before, and they know it's really good to bring out this thing in you. So then that person's done. Let's put him back in. It fits into the simulation idea. So yeah, put me into the year 3000. It'll bring up aspects, a different aspect of my personality and help to reveal some aspect within me. If we are going through the simulation to bring something out of us, to learn something, to become something, then that also makes sense just as much as reincarnation. And as I've studied this, my belief tends to be that it's both, that we reincarnate and we recur. And why not both? They don't have to exclude. Maybe for some of us we reincarnate and it works out better. For some of us we recur. I don't know. In the law of one, when I talked to those guys at LL Research, they're saying that Ra clearly says that we if we wanted to move forward faster, that we live multiple parallel lives at the same time, so that our soul can be embodied in multiple lives at the same time, as a sort of a way of speeding up the process. And then it's not all, but some souls do that, right? So there's also that aspect. And I know that there are some spiritual traditions, like my sister believes, that we have 8 incarnations going at the same time. And all of us have these 8, and some mystery schools are really big believers in that. When I say, oh, do you believe in parallel realities? Well, it's, the mystery schools say we only have 8 lives and we're all incarnated at the same time and we're just experiencing them at the same time. I, I don't know. That's why I love talking to you about it, because you pondered this stuff as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't pondered though, so I'm gonna have to look into recurring. I've heard of refolding with Walter Russell, right? Isn't that what it is?
So yeah,
Refolding.
Walter Russell uses some language, and I've gone and tried to see, is there more that he's saying? Let's everybody back up. One of the biggest mistakes in my life, I was offered this trip to see Walter Russell's. It's a university or school, and I was busy. Although I wasn't, I could have easily gone on this trip. And Nick said, "Are you going to come?" And Nick went to this amazing event where you got first class introduction to some of Walter Russell's stuff. Tell me more about that. I want to know more about your experience with that, because I totally missed out on that.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see the original Walter Russell documents, the documented
Oh,
test, the document that he wrote to, who was it? Einstein, that said, "You stole my work."
to
He like,
Einstein?
yeah, he wrote a letter to Einstein being like, "Hey, you stole my work. This is my work, actually. Like, you need to give me credit." I
I
have the
wasn't
paper.
aware of
I
that.
have the paper. I can give you the paper. I can share it with you.
That's fascinating. I know he communicated with Tesla, and Tesla was like, "Wow, I don't think people are ready for this." I remember seeing
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, that whole story I explored. I did a podcast with the people who ran the museum. It's called the Walter Russell Museum. It's in Waynesboro, Virginia. And yeah, I got to explore how Walter Russell saw reality. And I mean, here I'll give you a little taste here. I've got this book which he wrote. This is the book that he sent to like 300 universities at the time. Remember, this was like 1900s, 1930, 40, 50,
Right.
something like that.
Long time ago. It's like the
Yeah.
law of one if you wrote out and explained it scientifically, right?
Yeah. So it
The
has this book called
universal one, right?
Universal One. Right. And
Amazing.
they gave me this copy. And one thing that I just want to share is that have you had people on the podcast that have done theories of everything?
I've had a few that have tried, but nothing of note.
Nothing significant. Okay. So what you've got to realize about Walter Russell, and what I realized after spending many days there, is that he has his own language, essentially.
He
That's
does.
what that's what a lot of the that if you will listen to these podcasts that are about theory of everything and these conversations, they basically have their own language to describe everything. So if someone picks up the universal one, they're going to be like, "What is this dude saying?"
It's true. I noticed
Like,
that with the
let me
secret of life.
literally read a random
Sure.
page for you. He says on page 73, youth is preponderantly generative or power accumulative. Age is dominantly radiative or power releasive. You, the perfume of the budding rose is a disintegration of the preponderantly generating growing rose, but because of the electric preponderance, integration so exceeds disintegration that growth continues despite that disintegration until both forces are equalized in that which man calls death. That's a random page. Okay. So for someone to just pick his book up like this, you're probably not going to be able to understand it. I would recommend Secrets of Light, which is a little bit easier to
Yes.
understand. But yeah, my experience there was very interesting because you find out that he basically had a mystical experience at a young age, and he was able to essentially he got sent straight to God, like in a
Exactly.
sense. And he got the full download, and he
The
has stuff
full
like this,
download. Yeah.
where he describes the fundamental forces that run our universe.
And I
And
had sent you
so,
some pictures from a child's book from Walter Russell. When we were texting,
mhm.
and he had this realization when what he's like 7 years old, and he's doing these, he's showing these pictures. It's really amazing.
Yeah, so he basically has the same as the law of one in the octave department, where there's 10 octaves, I think, in his system.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting the way that he drew things, because it's like nothing you've ever seen before. Just like, I don't think I've ever seen anything drawn like that. So he drew his own essentially work, and he was a master sculptor. This dude
Yeah,
sculpted for like some of the
amazing
most
sculptor.
famous people. He
Yeah,
sat with some of the most famous people that have ever lived in that time, and he did sculptures of them in person. And
he's
so,
like this professional figure skater. Like he had
which
brought
is
figure
wild.
skating to New York, right?
I know, yeah. So, I mean, he basically explains everything about our reality, and yeah, they have I wouldn't call them, what would they could be called, retreats. Basically, yeah, they're essentially like retreats. You go there and you stay, and they have a program that they run you through, and they basically wanted me to come out and check it out and see what I thought, and it was fantastic. So I think they have another
Yeah,
one coming up here later this year, but
I might have to check that out for sure.
yeah, man. I mean, I'll meet you out there. We'll run it
Yeah,
back. We'll do it
I
right
want to
this time.
go to the house that he and his wife lived at the
I
end.
went
Oh, you went to it.
Swananoa.
So
Yep.
yeah, please tell me. It's like this, some dude just gave it to him. Like, yeah, you can live here until you die. It's like this amazing, beautiful mansion.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like, yeah, you guys can just have this.
Yeah.
That's true
So
manifesting, right?
yeah. So it's called Swananoa,
Just want to know it.
and it's basically on this super windy road on top of a hill, and they took us there and explained why they chose that place. It was absolutely massive. I mean, I'll send you some pictures of it. I don't know if I ever did, and in some videos I took some, but essentially they were there because they apparently went all around the country searching for a place they were potentially gonna. Robert Grant, who is a friend of mine, has told me that he was gonna do Laguna Beach, but it just didn't end up happening. But he ended up in Virginia, and the reason why was the energetic lines that all crossed at that location were so strong that he decided, this is where I need to be. This is where I need to set up, because I need to be on this essentially ley line. And for people who don't know what ley lines are, there essentially is a lot of theory that makes a lot of sense. There's hyperdimensional physics, which is a whole different part of it. Then there's actually grid lines. So there's different theories, but the premise is that the Earth has places where the energy is much higher, depending on the latitude and longitude you're at. And so Swananoa sits on one of those places, and I could feel it when I was there.
You could feel
And
it.
it's wild. You go into the backyard, and there's just levels. Backyard. It's like a huge lot, and there's like Roman Colosseum looking pillars all across the back, and yeah, she took us through some wild parts of it, and it's an absolutely fascinating place. And
It's just
he
amazing that
interesting
he
guy.
existed, and it changes. You put this in perspective. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
changes everything. And what I really got, the easiest thing for people that are watching that I got from Walter Russell, because it can be very complicated, and there is an easy way for you. Well, I just don't understand. Is that you're a creator and you're working in conjunction with the creator when you create. And there's this almost prayer, this wonderful spiritual thing that happens when he does his sculpture, when he does his art, that he's like working. And that was his big thing that he was teaching people, is that if you connect to the divine, it's there and available to you, and you are a partner, and you can create and do anything you want. All the evidence, all the answers and information are there for you at all times when you work as a partner with the creator in these creative moments.
Yeah, and I think as a part of that, they call that Christ consciousness. In the
Yeah.
sense, if you when you walk into the museum, there's a huge statue of Jesus, but there's the thing that says this is about Christ consciousness, and there's like a description of Jesus was just a relayer of this level of consciousness. It's not about Jesus the person, it's about the level of consciousness that he
Yes.
achieved, which is something that Walter Russell said that there's a couple other beings who have achieved that too. And Dr. Hawkins also said the same thing, that there was many beings who reached that same level. He called it enlightenment, Dr. Hawkins did, but Walter Russell calls it Christ consciousness. But I think they're all referring to the same thing, that there can be a way for you to connect to this remembrance of what you really are, but still maintain a level of movement in the body, and you don't become like this Buddha who goes off and never comes
Right.
back, or the Tibetan rainbow bodies where your body disintegrates,
Right.
and so there are beings that choose to come back to help humanity. And from law of one perspective, then that's a wanderer, right?
Right.
That comes back and continually wants to be of service. And so yeah, Walter Russell is a I don't even know how to describe him. He's a rare gem that
No doubt.
he was very different from everyone at his time. Some of One of the things he discovered was he discovered elements before science did. And so that's one of the things that, if you're wondering how legit he is, he basically wrote letters to people saying you're missing this, and he discovered things that they didn't
Right.
know yet through his own realization.
But
So
it wasn't through him sitting in a lab looking through a microscope. It was just
correct.
literally getting downloads because he's one-on-one in this connection that he had. So he didn't know how to sculpt. He was told it's like he could literally gain any skill immediately because he had that connection. That was
And
what
that
was so.
was, yeah, that was part of his downfall, but yet his brilliance was that he was not educated in the system, which is why a lot of people didn't take his work
Right.
seriously. So it was kind of a double-edged sword with that too. It's like he didn't have the degrees and stuff, so therefore whenever he wrote letters or had his theories, everybody's like, oh, this guy doesn't have this, which is really annoying. But it's unfortunate, but I don't think that the world works that way anymore. I think a lot of people are
No.
seeing that geniuses can come through without having to go through a system of telling people how to think, but they can have divine realizations. But then again, you just got to be careful and really feel into that person, because then you can start cults that way, or you can have things happen that are not the greatest. So, always follow your intuition. And I say that about everything. Follow kind of not necessarily what you want to be true, but just really look at and feel into your body and how your body feels. But the thing is, if you do that and you're not connected to truth or above 200 on the Hawkins scale, then you won't even be able to tell what truth is. So first you have to reach a high enough level of consciousness to where you can recognize truth, because that's how, if you can't recognize truth, that's the biggest downfall of humanity. That's a reason why a lot of people say that these masters have come here to help humanity be able to recognize truth from falsehood. So it's not just everybody has access to truth in their body or to what's actually real in that sense, but you have to develop and do the inner work so that you can recognize that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Final question. I've drug you on a little longer than you because I can't help it.
It's a pleasure, man.
One of
I'm
the
good.
coolest episodes you had was when you pondered the question we've all seen: when you see the light, when you die and you see the light, it's all a deception. If we move into the light, we get stuck back into the cycle of reincarnation. And then you did a little deep dive on this to see, hey, is it true? Should we follow the light? So tell me, should I, when I finally, leave this mortal coil and I see the light, what should I do, Nick? I'll have you in mind at that moment. I'll be
Oh
like,
no,
hey,
that's a lot of pressure. I don't want that. I don't want that pressure. Yeah, I did. So I did. You're referring to an episode I did on is reincarnation a soul trap?
Right.
Which is going over the concepts of, there's a lot of, I don't know how to describe this, small talk. You'll hear people say, don't go into the light, don't go in. And you're like, what? Where are you getting this information? And so I wanted to deep dive so I knew myself for my own purposes. Like, what
And
do
you
I
you
want to
do
do?
the perfect skit where you're literally like your good friend that's just asking like, what? Like, I love how you do it. So
I'm working on some different characters, but yeah, we've got
no, they're
the two
all
main.
great. Yeah.
Nice. I'm glad you appreciate that. But so I went over Gnosticism and how they see this world as a evil thing, essentially an impure thing, because they have the demiurge, which basically, so to kind of run that back, the whole Gnostic belief is that there is this part of God, this emanation, who is a pure God, is Sophia. And Sophia wants to create without permission from the Most High. And Sophia is a dastardly one, and she procreates with herself and then creates essentially an abomination. And that abomination is called the demiurge. And she was so ashamed of her creation that she hid it in a cloud. and that this demiurge thought it was God because there's nothing else, because it's in its own cloud. It doesn't see anything else. So the Gnostic belief is that that is our world, that we live in that world created by the demiurge, and so they fundamentally see our world as evil. And so that was the first part, because I wanted to understand, where is there any inherent belief that the world is evil? Most other traditions all around the world, that is inherently false, that the world is evil. This is like the only tradition that I can find that stated that. So that's an interesting part of it. Now, if we keep going, we see that there's a lot of text to speech videos on YouTube saying, don't go into the light, don't go in. And there's nothing really to it. And so
Right.
there was a lot of like hoopla. And I ended up finding out that there's this esoteric term called ring pass knot that is from theosophy, that I don't even know if I should say this guy's name because he's like a Voldemort. I didn't even say his name in the video
Don't
of
then.
somebody online. So I'm not going to say his name, but there's a
No
guy who is
Voldemort's allowed, so
that's fine. So they're just as people who are saying some really wild things about the nature of reality that will take terms like ring pass knot, which is essentially like you have barriers that you can't get past until you reach a certain level of consciousness. And so the premise is that if you don't reach that level of consciousness, then you keep going around. But I think it's, at the end of the day, it is just fear mongering, because my essential point with the video is that if you don't want to play a video game anymore, but you said, I'm going to play this game till I complete it, then you're probably going to be upset and feel like it's a trap because you don't want to play it anymore. But now you're forced to play it because you said you would.
right.
And so when I see this thing of it's all a soul trap, that's what I think it is. I think it's just people that are salty that they've chosen before. Okay, I'm going to complete level 3 of this game, no matter how many times I go around. I mean, from what we're talking about, the law of one, it's hard to do. So there's going to be people that are salty that don't want to play the game anymore, but there's no real um, significance. I couldn't find any traditions that really had a good explanation for it being a soul trap, or that the white light being this thing that you should not go to. Rather, in most traditions, it's actually the thing that heals you. And
Right.
so it would make sense that if there was negative entities, they would want to convince you to not go to the thing that heals
Right.
you. So I think there's a lot of manipulation there, but at the end of the day, my recommendation, which you should always make through your own decisions, is it's probably safe to go to the light. And that's what I'll do.
If our hearts are open when it happens, we can just ask our heart, and we will have learned the lesson of knowing the truth in that moment, as you were saying. And it doesn't matter what we believe, we will know the truth either
Mm-hmm.
way, and we will follow that truth because we've learned how to realize the truth in this incarnation, which makes more
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I think it comes down to the heart. When you open up, you're going to pop out of this. This is my interpretation of what happens after all my research. You're going to open up, you're going to pop out of your body, you're going to look around and see you're in the astral type realm. You're going to probably have some sort of being come to you and be like, hey, what's up? It's been a while. You've done this like 60 times or 6,000 times. And then you're going to probably start remembering a little bit. They're going to be like, all right, let's go here. Let's heal a little bit. And then we'll chat about it. You go into like these healing center type deals. Uh, and you basically start to remember, and the memories come back, just like if you took a part of your awareness, put it into a video game, then you put it back with the rest of your awareness. That's what essentially is happening, that that awareness that you're actually that you're in a video game is still outside of this experience, and that comes back and it merges with the part of you that was actually projecting itself into the video game. So you'll remember that, and you'll kind of have an experience of going over, we have all of these traditions that talk about some sort of judgment. Again, I think that's a fear-based thing that I haven't really found any sort of reason why that would be true, except if you're trying to control people being scared of the afterlife, which is, I think, a lot of what happens with some of these larger traditions. And so
Mhm.
that way people are controllable. And so, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we have that experience of going into the soul world. This is kind of what Dr. Michael Newton says in his Journey of Souls book, and his regressions. I think some of Dolores Cannon agrees with this as well.
Mhm.
But I think that death is nothing to fear. At the end of the day, my message is that we should probably not take this as serious because we don't know where the hell we came from. And I think that part of taking it less serious is having empathy, because nobody knows what they're doing. That's why some of the most universal teachings are forgive them for they know not what they do, because nobody knows what they're doing. So forgive them. That, I mean, so I'm not saying Jesus had all bad things to say. I'm definitely not saying that.
Right.
What I'm saying is that a lot of it got distorted through history, but those tried and true principles are still there. So I think at the end of the day, Socrates, one of my favorite quotes, the only thing that I know is that I know nothing, essentially. That's paraphrasing, but that's pretty close. And that's how I live my life. I don't know anything for sure, but I can feel into what feels harmonious and how I can be of service to people in the world and live a life that I want to live. And I think that when you have that intention of being in service to other people, just like helping them in some way, it doesn't have to be a thing where you're like going in, you're donating food or going to a food bank. That's what a lot of people used to say. It can be as simple as I make videos that I feel like are entertaining and help people to lighten up. I feel like that's serving the world. It doesn't have to be this grandiose
You're
thing.
not you don't have
life.
to be joining the community volunteer program to be of service. You can do it from your home. Sometimes you can be of service without ever actually being around other people, which is very helpful, at least in this day.
Oh yeah, I mean, you've got the Buddhist, what is it called, Tonka? Is it called something like that, where you're taking in negativity of the world and then you're
Exactly.
transmuting that out. And so a lot of the service that I think we do to the world, this is interesting because it goes back to the very part of it, wraps around. You said at the beginning, you're like, this is too hard. But if we're just in a loving energy, not even doing anything in particular, that's what actually many traditions say is help the world the most. It brings up the collective consciousness of humanity because of our own frequency. So it doesn't have to be this thing, like you said, where you go out and do these things to help people all the time. It can just be being loving everywhere you go. You go to Whole Foods, you go to Walmart, you go down the street, you're just not being a piece of shit to people. And if you do that more than you don't, then the law of one says, hey, let's just move on now. So who knows? Who knows, man?
The one other book I'd love to have a discussion with you, I'm not sure if you've read it, so I'll mention it now. So the next time we talk, I want to get your vibe on it. Is Reality Transurfing? If you've ever gotten a chance to read that.
Oh my God. I've had like 6 people tell me to read that book and I haven't yet. I will absolutely read that.
It's a Russian book. So the language is off and it's edited in a way that the translation has its issues. And then later, after a bunch of research on it, he reveals it was channeled. He has 2 major books. He has a bunch of books, but the 2 ones that we have access to are The Princess Tufti and Reality Transurfing, which is it's like 5 books in one book. But it's a model, and he's a he did quantum physics, so it's a model on creating reality that is it's almost a software download on a process that you use, that you become aware of, and how you create reality that's helpful, at least to have as a background knowledge on the way that reality is sort of creating itself. In particular, pendulums and what happens if we game plan it out. When multiple people's thoughts are working in conjunction, there has to be some part of the model of understanding reality creation and understanding that. Obviously, if we're all powerful, but then a bunch of us are thinking thoughts are along the same frequency, it creates something else, kind of. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts on this. So the next time we talk, I'll get your vibe on what you think. So
yeah, we'll be back. I had to choose between reading Reality Transurfing and Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. And
oh my God, I'm just a huge Rick Rubin fan.
Me too.
Primarily because he's taken some great artists that were just kind of okay, and then just put out these banger albums that are just amazing. And I always knew that he had some deep knowledge. So
yeah, have you read Creative Act?
I haven't got a chance to read it yet, but I plan on. I knew the book about the book, but it's out, right? Okay.
Okay. The deal is you read that book.
I'll read Rick Rubin and you read Transurfing, and we'll go back and talk. So
sounds
the one,
good, man.
The only Nick Zay, please go and Amazon, and you can find his book, 10 Secrets of Awakening. I most likely will have the link in the description so you can purchase this amazing book. If you are in the process of awakening, it's a deep and really well written book. And check out Universe the Game, the podcast. There's some amazing interviews on there. Nick's one of my
been on there.
I have. Nick is one of my very favorite people, and I cannot wait for his next video and whatever he creates. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me. It's an honor. Keep up the incredibly great work in awakening people. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Reality Revolution, brother.
Thank you, man.